So I'm gonna right click and I'm gonna create a sphere because that's like your basic stuff. All right, and then what I want to do is instantiate this like kind of like when you fire a gun and instantiates a bullet and then the bullets move. We're gonna do something like that. So first, let's create a script. So I'm gonna create a brand new empty game object, and I just did that by right clicking and saying empty. And I'm gonna call this the I'm just going to call this the player, I guess. What better word for that? Player. And then over here it says add component. These are so when I click on player, I see all the game objects, or these are your game objects in the hierarchy. And when I click on it, I get a list of all the components that are on each one. And you can add components like colliders and rigid bodies for physics and audio source for audio. But you can also create your own, and that's what we're going to do today. So I'm going to create a new script, and I'm going to call it player. So I do new scripts, and I'm going to name it player, and hit create and add. And then Unity is going to recompile, so it'll kind of hang for a little bit as it accepts this new script. And it puts it at the very root of your project in assets. And something that's good practice is to stay organized. So I'm going to click down in my project to create, and I'm going to create a folder. And I'm going to call this scripts. And then put the player in there. And that's just good good organization right here. So I'm going to double click the player script to open it in my default IDE, or integrated development environment. And it just happens to be Visual Studio because that's what ships with Unity. I'm going to pull this down. Is this going to work? This will work. It'll be a little funky, but this will help. All right. So what I want to do is, in response to pushing a button like the space bar, I want to instantiate a sphere, or this specific sphere that I have here. So first thing I need to do is have a reference to a game object. So you've got virtually two choices when you declare variables. They can be private or public. If it's public, you'll see it in the inspector, and you'll see what I mean here in a second. So game object, I'm just going to call this a sphere prefab. And just as an example, so oops, not make this one private. So just to show the distinction between these two lines of code, here's the sphere prefab. That's this one. So now that I've written this line of code in Unity, I can see it in the inspector. But this one you do not see, and it's because this one is private. So there's a little bit more to it than that, but for the most part, public means you can see it. Private means it exists, but you can't see it. But I do need a place to spawn it. So I'm going to call this one a transform. So what is a transform? I'm going to call this a spawn point. So every object that you create has a transform. There's no like if your object exists, it exists at a point, and so your transform describes your position, your rotation, and your scale. So then what I want to do is when the game starts, I'm going to say sphere prefab. No, I'm going to say instantiate is what I'm going to say. So this is a built-in keyword or part of the API for Unity. I'm just going to give it the sphere prefab. So when the game begins, we're going to instantiate a sphere. So this is something that's kind of unique to Unity, is that Unity has a prefab system. So if you're playing like a first-person shooter and you push the button to shoot, a new bullet it gets put into world space, and then that bullet does something. So we're going to do that similar here. So we're just going to call this a bullet. Now I've created this in the scene, but I don't want it to be in the scene. I want it to be a prefab. So what I'm going to do is come down here in the projects, So I've got my scenes, I've got my scripts, and I'm also going to have my prefabs. So this is pretty common folder hierarchy. So I take the bullet, and I'm literally just going to drag it into the project. So if I right click it and hit show and explore, that's just a fancy shortcut to bring up my window. So just for some clarity, here I've got, so down here in Unity you can see assets and then prefab scripts and scenes. Same thing in here. I've got assets and I've got prefab scripts and scenes. So what you see down here is your file explorer for the most part. It's what you see if you were to like browse the files in your Explorer. You also see some meta stuff, but like just ignore that. Like you don't really need to mess with those at all. They're just helpful to Unity to like hold references and stuff.
Do you mind if we ask questions during?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to just do all that in one spot. Go ahead,
Oh, it's
ask
fine. You have
away.
a question. Are objects under scene like displayed on the top left window, like where you can actually see the game?
Yeah, so I have one scene in my project. So if I come into the scenes folder, I have this sample scene, and that is what you're seeing here. So a scene, you could also call it a stage or a room if you played Game Maker or used Game Maker. I think they kind of went with like the director or like the movie set or like a stage production kind of nomenclature. Or
Right.
do go ahead.
So like so what you see on the top left is like is displaying all the objects under scene.
Yes.
Okay. And so to have that, like the folder specifically has to be named scene.
So scenes are kind of like levels. So like if
Oh,
you're
I
playing
see.
Super
Okay.
Mario, you go to level 1 and you play, that level, and then you go to a different level. So each one of those levels is a scene. And you
Okay, I
might have a
see.
scene that's like the main menu, or you have a scene that's like your credits. So if I right click in here, go to create, I can create more scenes. Somewhere is my button scene. Yeah. And I'll call this like level 2 scene. And if I go inside here, there's nothing. It's just a
Oh,
basic.
okay, I see.
I'll put a cube in here just so it's different. So this is the cube level, and I go back into the sample scene, and this is the sphere level.
Right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Cool. Thank you for stopping me. And by all means, if you guys, I'll try to leave more. Like I'll try to take more breaths so you have more opportunity to interrupt me. Right. So we have notice that bullet is blue, and that's because it is a prefab. So it's like a blueprint. Prefabs are like a collection of game objects that you've set aside and say this is this is a blueprint for this thing. So you can have prefabs of players or environments or bullets, projectiles. In this case, we're gonna prefab a bullet. So now that it's blue, I can hit delete and I can just get rid of it. And so what I want to do over here in the player script is I want to reference that bullet. Um, so something that happens in Unity is if you click like on folders, you lose what you had focused in the inspector. So to fix that, I click on what I want to keep, and I'm gonna hit this lock icon up here. And so now when I click on anything else, I don't lose this, and that helps because there's a lot of dragging and dropping in Unity. So I'm gonna go into my prefabs folder, and I've got this bullet, and I'll put it in there. And so the bullet exists like as a file, right? So it doesn't exist in my scene yet. It exists like it's data that I'm gonna load and put into my scene. So let's see. So I have this on start. I'm gonna instantiate the prefab. So let's test that. So I'll hit the play button up here, and it's gonna load the scene, and then it happened instantaneously, but it did in fact instantiate a clone of the bullet. Big stuff happening, but complicated things are made up of simple things. So let's put this bullet back in the scene, and I want to play around with it. So I want it to move through space, right? Like I want it to be a bullet. I want it to move. So let's add a bullet script. So add a component. I'm going to add a new script called bullet. And then clear. So then where did that go? Oh, right. So new scripts get created at your root of the project called assets, and I like to stick them in scripts. So let's you can double click the script in the project, or you can double click it over here, and that'll bring up. So now we've got a bullet, and the bullet isn't going to do anything in start, but it will do something in update. So what we're going to do is it's going to be a bullet. So I want it to hold on. So I want to look at the scene and the game at the same time. So I'm just going to drag that down here. Now I can see them side by side. So yeah, I want the bullet to move away from the camera as soon as it's created. So I'm looking over here in the transform, and when I grab the blue arrow and I move it, it's moving in a positive direction from Z. So Z is increasing. So if I add to Z, it's going to move in that direction. So you can see this is this is your north, south, east, and west. These are this gizmo shows your the absolute direction, and so Z is forward in the world space. So I'm just going to be really simple, and I'm just going to increase Z to make it move forward. So pretty easy thing. So update is a function that's built in, and it gets called once per frame. So it's a really good spot to do stuff that happens continuously. So the other one is start. Start happens once, and then update happens all the time. So in this case, we're going to use. So what we need to modify is the transform. So this script, the bullet, is on the same game object as this transform. So what we can do is we can say transform. Nah, I don't like that. That's a little complicated. So we're gonna create a component. We need to get a reference to. We need to get a reference to this transform. So we create the type, which is transform, and then we give it a name, which did you see this a lot? Uppercase transform, lowercase transform. It just means that this is a variable whose name is transform, and it is of type transform. And then we're going to use this function. It's called get component. So I know that right now the programming just went up by 10, like the difficulty. I'll break it down for you. Get component is how you access all these, I guess your sibling components. So everything on a game object is a component, and I want to get the transform, and because I want to mess with the position. So there are some built-in functions that you can use, but this is a good one because this is how you can stick rigid body in here, or you can stick a collider. But in this case, it's gonna be the same thing over there. So now we have a transform. Now we're gonna say transform dot position, because that's the thing right here. So transform is the component, position is the variable, and we want to hit the Z, and we're going to add to it. So we can't add to the Z directly. If I say dot Z, so I can't say equals 10. So even if I do that, nah. So it's kind of funky, but when you mess with the position, you have to mess with all three of the coordinates. You have to do X, Y, and Z. So it ups the complexity just a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a vector 3. We're going to call this movement. And then we will do plus equals movement. So a vector 3 is 3 floats, X, Y, and Z. That's what this is. So position, rotation, and scale, they're each vector 3s. It's an X, it's a Y, and a Z. So what we'll do is we'll say is equal to new vector 3. And how do we want it to move? I'm just going to take a guess and say 0 in the X, 0 in the Y, and then 1 in the Z. And so every frame, we're going to look for this component. We're going to take a movement, and then we're going to take our current position, and we're going to add that movement to it. So really, all it's going to do is add 1 to our Z every frame. And we're going to check out what that looks like. And so there's already a bullet in my scene. Well, there's going to be 2. I'll just so you can delete things, or you can just disable them. So if I click this tick mark up here, it disables the game object. So it exists, but it's just hidden. It's as good as deleted, but it's still there. So, oops, I made a very obvious mistake. Okay, so down here on the bullet, it's kind of hard to tell, but it has this plus icon next to it. So this is a change that I made to an instance of the prefab. So if I come back into the bullet that's in the prefabs folder and I click on it, the parent, like the master blueprint, doesn't have that script on it. So what I need to do is right click it, add, and say apply to prefab. And then now all the blue's gone, the plus is gone, and if I click on this, then it's over here. So what that is, it's an override. So like you can make changes. So I could say like this bullet, I don't know, I'm gonna make it a cube or something, or I'm gonna make it blue, or I'm gonna make it this one different, but it doesn't mess with the blueprint. But in this case, I did want every bullet that gets spawned should have that script on it. So that's why I modified the prefab. So now the bullet gets spawned and it will move forward. And it zooms. And it's totally gone forever. So look how fast it's going. It's going so fast, like it's really hard to tell how fast it's going. But every frame, I increased its Z value by 1, and look at it. It's like just cruising along, and that's because my frame rate is at like 1,000 frames per second. It's going really fast. So that has 2 implications. The one is if you have a faster computer, it will play more frames in the same amount of time. And so we need to account for this. So what we do is we multiply it by this this field called delta time. So delta means change. It's a math term to mean change in time. And so time.delta time is it's the time between frames. So this way, if it runs at 60 frames a second and it has a small difference in time, or if it runs at 10 frames a second and has a big difference in time, it will run consistently. Like it doesn't matter how fast or slow your computer is, it will run it will run at the same speed. So it moves slower and more consistently. But I want to mess with this, right? I want to part of the power of Unity is that I don't want to go into the code and mess with my variables and like recompile the project every time I want to tinker with something. So what you can do is you can expose these variables to the inspector. So I made a public float. Float means floating point, or like a number with a fraction. And when I touch the bullet now, here you can see that speed value, and it defaults to 0. So then I will do times speed. And so now what's cool is that I don't have to touch the script anymore to mess with the speed. I can start the game and it's not moving because the speed is 0. And then I can like mess with it. Oh, that's because this is the, whoops, I was touching the wrong one. I want to touch the clone. That's one. So now when I do 0.1, now you can see it moving. So like I can speed it up. I can slow it down. I can actually, if you make it negative, it comes backwards. So this is a cool feature because you don't have to mess with the code. Like once it's in the inspector, you can mess with it all here. And then if I make it so there it goes. So something to note is pay attention to this value here. the bullet speed. When I stop Unity, well, let me show that again. So we'll just have 2 bullets for now. Or no, what I'll do is I'll turn off the player. Just have 1 bullet. Okay, so 500. I don't know. It has just a huge speed. So the point is that notice there's a value here, and I stop play mode, and it resets to 0. So this is something that's a gotcha to people not familiar with Unity, is that and this is the behavior that you want, is that when the director yells cut and the action stops, you want everything to reset to how it was before you said action, or like before the scene started. So so before the game starts, the speed is at 0 and his position is here, and we kind of want that behavior of resetting, because like I want everything to start back, how it began. But that's a gotcha, is that sometimes like you'll tinker, you'll find like the perfect spot for something, you'll stop play mode, and then it resets everything. So just watch out for that. Something you can do is that while the game is moving, or while you're in play mode, you set the rotation, you set the scale, you do everything exactly how you want it to be, you get it just right, however right looks to you, and then you right click on something and you say copy component, and then when you exit, you paste that component values, and then now it is what it is. So that's a funky little gotcha that happens, but just pay attention that when you exit play mode, the everything that's in your scene gets reset to the moment before your scene began. Any questions on all this so far?
Yeah. Or okay.
Yeah, I mean it catches you by surprise. So if you notice, my screen turns greenish, like this greenish blue tint when I'm in play mode, and that's to remind me that I'm in play mode and that my changes won't be found, or won't be saved. So to do that, let me just okay. So to change this, you go into edit, and then you go down to preferences, and then choose colors, and that's the play mode tint. So I have a friend who sticks his in red, and so when he enters play mode, it turns. Oh, I can't do it. Red's too much for me. But yeah, I don't know what was it before. Yeah, I recommend doing that, just so you don't make that mistake. Sorry, did someone else have a question?
Yeah, so I know in other game engines that when you insert an object like this into the game and then run it, like, they already have like some background physics running. Like, if you're just insert an object and then run it in some other engine, it might the object, let's say the sphere, in for example, would like drop down
Hmm.
by like the act of gravity.
Hmm.
Um, does the same thing apply here to Unity? Like, let's say you were to run it without that script that changes the position, what would happen?
Yeah, well, so I'll show you. So I disabled the script by turning off the tick mark, and that stops update from happening, and it just stays here in space. So it does nothing. So in order to get the behavior that you're talking about, what you need to do is add a rigid body. That's the component in Unity that handles physics. So if it has a collider, then like you can tell if it's hit something, but if you want it to like if you want things like gravity or drag, then it has to have a rigid body. And now when I hit play, it falls to the ground because it has gravity.
Oh, right.
There it goes. And so what I can do is create a cube. I will lower the cube. Wait, I'll reset the cube. Yeah, if you ever need to, like, if your game object is like lost and you want to focus it, if you double click it, your camera zooms and focuses to it. So I'll put it at the center. Where's my bullet? So the bullet has a rigid body and the cube does not, but they both have colliders. And so when I play the game, the sphere will now rest on the box. So the box, I guess it won't move with it, but if I move the box, then it moves.
Oh. Right. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. So I'll
Also, let's
do. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, let's say that you wanted to like move the bullet via velocity. Would you also
Mhm.
use a rigid body for that?
Yeah, of course. So the rule of thumb is that if you're if you have a rigid body, then you should always move your script. Like if something has a rigid body, you should always move it through the rigid body. That's because moving something with its translation is essentially teleporting it. But
Right.
if it's got physics, you don't want it to be teleported. You want it to be like physically manipulated, like
Right.
with the engine. So I'll just give a brief show on how to do that. So instead of using this transform or this get component pattern, instead what you can do is you can say public rigid body or any other script or any other class that you want to, and then I'll just say my rigid body, and then rigid body has something called velocity, and we'll do that instead. Yeah, so let's put that down here actually. So this will have slightly different behavior since velocity is accumulative. This will accumulate, and it will like slowly and steadily like speed up. So this isn't like you don't copy this and now you have a bullet, but this is to showcase that it should be ever increasing. Oh, I have an error. Yes. So I have an unassigned reference exception. So that's big fancy words for you forgot to drag and drop me. So I created the rigid body as a public field, but I need to assign it. So I can either grab the whole bullet and drag it in, and it will automatically find the thing that fits, or you can just drag the thing in there itself. But now that has been set, yeah, this will work. So now I can hit play. And now the error's gone, and it should be moving just ever so slightly. There it goes. Oop. And it's just gone forever. Let's reset that. Let's hit this to like 5. Let's turn off gravity. There it goes. And it's going to continuously speed up because that's how velocity works, because you're at it because it's cumulative. But you give it gravity, and it's just going to tumble. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, also I gotta go, but I just want to say thanks for um showing us this, and yeah, I hope we can join more meetings later.
For sure. Yeah, no, this is a good place to close. It's a little after. But yes, everyone, guys, thank you all for coming. Thanks for asking questions. Thank you for showing your stuff. I love seeing what everyone is working on. It's a lot of fun, and I like to see your progress. So next week we will do the asset shuffle showcase. So you've got one more week to work on the asset shuffle. If you have questions about that, feel free to ask, but you can find the information in the asset shuffle channels on the left side of our Discord. And thanks for coming, guys, and I'll see y'all next week.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was
Thanks
really
for coming.
helpful.
Cool. I'm glad.
I have a question about the Friday event.
Yes.